Thanks for letting me give this talk on imposter syndrome today. One way my personal imposter syndrome manifests itself is through talking very fast. Somewhere along the way, my brain started thinking that that made me sound smarter. It's probably not true, and I'll try to slow down, but I probably won't, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. One more thing is that I tend to read a lot from my notes here. That's just because it's not a technical talk where I know all the information. I gotta actually look at my notes a lot. All right, so
You started earlier.
So this is the short version of the intro I already gave. Self-taught dev, about 20 years experience, all sorts of tech stacks. I now run a company called Hello World to support all the incredible new tech businesses and developers that are showing up in Portland, Oregon. I also run a program called Mentorship Saturdays, which is specifically designed to help people get into the industry and level up in the industry. So in this talk, I'll be focusing on taking action to overcome bouts of imposter syndrome. This won't necessarily cure you. I still struggle with it all the time, but hopefully you'll leave with some tools to overcome it when you do encounter it. So I had some interesting thoughts as the first time I prepared to submit this talk. Am I really qualified to speak on this? I'll probably have peers in the audience, and what if they know my journey and that I'm not a classically trained programmer, let alone a psychologist? What if they think I'm an imposter developer and therefore my take on imposter syndrome is also lousy? So this wasn't just stage fright. I'm kind of a natural clown. Being up here isn't that tough for me. But imposter syndrome can still pop up for anyone at any time. I won't deny that having a certain amount of confidence is needed to do what I've done, or talk at conferences for that matter, but I'll challenge anybody who thinks that I don't or still suffer from imposter syndrome. To illustrate this point, I'll be taking some breaks from the main presentation to tell some stories about my own and others' episodes, and we will call this Disaster Piece Theater. So we'll start with the first story. I was pretty excited to learn that I'd been accepted to talk at DevZiner 2014 in Portland. I worked hard on my presentation, and I was over the moon the day that it came to give it. But when I stepped up to the podium, this is going to sound familiar, it then took me 5 minutes and some audience participation to get the two screens working right together. So I knew right there in my heart that everybody in the room knew what a fraud I was. I'm sure they were thinking, how can this guy be presenting when he can't even work the projector? In reality, I was able to present on a topic that didn't have many experts, and I was presenting something that I had created myself. So why was I worried? And everybody knows that developers can't work projectors or printers anyway. We'll also be getting a little help from Dr. Seuss as we go today. This will be a little cheesy, but this book was written to inspire confidence in children. But I happened to pick it up and read it to my daughter the night I heard that Portland Code School had abruptly closed. Here I was thinking, how am I going to help all these students who have just been abandoned by their school? But the fact that it had closed is sad, but it was just another obstacle to overcome. Things happen, servers crash, databases get corrupted. As Dr. Seuss gave his advice to my daughter, I realized that this was a great allegory for learning how to code. So it will be a little cheesy, but I'll be reading it as we go along, and I've made some slight changes for our purposes today. So congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places, you're coding away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know. And you are the person who will decide where you go. You'll look up and down tech stacks, look them over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to use anything that isn't quite leet. And you may not find any you'll want to choose. In that case, of course, open source you will choose. It's opener there in the wide open air. Out there things can happen and frequently do to people as brainy and footsy as you. And then things start to happen. Things start to happen. Don't worry. Don't stew. Just go right along. You'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll code. So the acceptance email I got for a conference I spoke at last summer went something like this. We accepted your talk even though you misspelled imposter in your title. Holy cow, was I embarrassed. Here I am submitting a talk in which I have misspelled the most crucial word in the entire talk. My first thought was, oh, this is a great story for my presentation. As it turns out, you can actually spell imposter with an E or an O, and the jury's still out on which is preferred, so now I like to flip freely between the two to confuse people. So, the Caltech Counseling Center has this definition on their site, and it can be summed up as feeling inadequate even though you have performed in that area before. So let's take a second to read it. Can everybody read this okay? Great. All right, now raise your hand if you can relate to this at all. Wow, not everybody. We've got some superstars. Cool. So who does it happen to? There's always obligatory parts in any writings on imposter syndrome where they tell you who suffers from it. I've found that this is an extremely common theme amongst writers on the topic. So there are many, many examples of high-functioning people who have claimed imposter syndrome, but right now I'm only going to quote this one. So let's read it and let it sink in for a minute. I'll go ahead and read it off the screen in case you can't see it. The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. This is Albert freaking Einstein. Research suggests that 2 out of 5 successful people feel like they're a fraud. And I'd bet dimes to the dollars that this is much higher in development. So really quickly, this phenomenon was first identified in women entering the workplace last century. Most speculate that doubt of women's qualifications was internalized by the women themselves, and while outwardly confident, they suffered in the workplace. I can definitely notice sometimes women suffering from this a little bit more than men, at least in my immediate experience. And this talk will focus on imposter syndrome from my perspective as a male developer. But these tools have helped both me and the male and women developers I've worked with, and I hope that they can help you too, but I don't claim to be able to accurately speak to the full breadth of a woman's perspective on this issue. Before we go too far into the pep talk, it's also important to note that imposter syndrome is a sign of intelligence, not ignorance. It serves a valuable purpose in asking the base question, should I be doing this? People who lack imposter syndrome will continually run headlong into walls, wondering who put the wall there. There's a scene from the movie The Other Guys, a movie with Will Ferrell, Marky Mark, I highly recommend it, in which the hero cops of the city are chasing bad guys across the roof. The bad guys then clip onto a zip line and zip down 6 stories to the ground. The hero cops, lacking any semblance of imposter syndrome, look at each other and say, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" The other guy says, "Yep. Aim for the bushes." So they jump, spoiler alert, and the camera follows them all the way down to the concrete. Needless to say, they didn't make it. So even though I'm going to be talking about how to overcome it, it's definitely important to be aware of when you're about to jump off a building. So here's an unattributed quote I found. Though traditionally perceived as an ingrained personality trait, imposter syndrome has more recently been studied as a reaction to certain situations. One of those situations is development. It's less about you being the Black Knight with a flesh wound and more about you being in a Monty Python movie. In fact, the open source world in particular, where your work is peer reviewed by other talented developers, is a notorious breeding ground for imposter syndrome. To everyone in this room, you didn't take the easy route, where your mastery of a trade that hasn't changed in decades is easily measured and observed. You chose a career in which you were asked to do things that we've never done before, over and over again. And naturally, this can lead to feelings of inadequacy. Do you like how I breezed through the only code in this presentation too quick for you to evaluate it? That's my imposter syndrome. It doesn't help that the industry puts some pretty unrealistic titles and requirements out there, like rock stars, ninjas, or sorceresses. Has anyone heard a job description like this? Looking for a Perl warlock with 10 plus years in Ruby, Linux kernel contributions, and experience doing isometric transformations in Canvas. COBOL experience a plus. In the early years, even the crappiest of us, he's heard it. In the early years, even the crappiest of us, which was me, were considered wizards because we could do what other people couldn't, plain and simple. But now people think of it as much more of a commodity position, but still expect us to have the proficiency and skill of a ninja. Somewhere along the lines, people stopped admiring rock stars and started expecting them. I'm a yellow belt in 3 different martial arts. That's 1 above white belt. I played in a cover band, and I still dabble in some sleight of hand coin magic. This does not make me a ninja, a rock star, or a sorcerer. So trying to live up to these expectations is tough to say the least. You'll be on your way up. You'll be making great sites. You'll join the high flyers who code to high heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you code, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you code, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. Not everybody learns at the same speed or in the same way. I like to think that my learning curve's a little like the first one. I can learn the basics of something very quickly, but it's actually pretty rare that I gain mastery in a subject. I've also worked with others who seem like they aren't understanding anything until some magical aha moment where their knowledge and confidence just skyrocket. It's important that we identify these curves in ourselves and others and try to accommodate them. So a good friend and coworker of mine who now gives his own talks at DrupalCamps almost didn't make it when he started at the company I used to work for. Although we recognized his talent and knew that he'd have some ramp-up time with Drupal because he was new to it, he struggled. He was the slow build skyrocket type. On his side, he was completely terrified and almost gave notice on multiple occasions because he was completely convinced that he was swindling us. Then one day in week 5, he hit a stride and he just started killing it. He surpassed my back-end Drupal knowledge within that month and is now way better than I am. We don't do cookie-cutter work in development. We're in the business of solving problems. It's actually rare that the problems we solve are duplicates of previous problems. In fact, even when the problems are duplicates, technology may have changed in the meantime, requiring a new solution anyway. I don't know about you, but I can't point to 2 sites or applications in my experience that I've done exactly the same way. Things just simply move too quickly. So, these are some ways and situations that can trigger imposter syndrome, and recognizing what your triggers are will help you combat them. Every project is a delicate, unique little snowflake that requires its own personal touches and flourishes. This can be fun, but it can also be very nerve-wracking. If we could simply pump out the same snowflakes over and over again, somebody would build a website machine, maybe like Squarespace, and be done with it. I had thought at one point that grid.io, the site that will dynamically create site and layouts based on your content, would put me out of a job. Like I said earlier, don't worry, I have this feeling all the time. 1998, I was pretty sure Dreamweaver was going to let my son put together websites like Legos. Luckily, we're still employed. But the reality is, as soon as somebody can identify a grid.io site, people and companies will want to be different. The pitch will literally be, I don't want it to look like a grid.io site. So we're constantly creating new things, and that can wear on a person. It may cause you to have thoughts like, why am I struggling? I've done this a million times. Or, why am I not faster and better at this by now? The truth is, we're delicate, unique snowflake constructors, and no snowflake's the same. Estimating is hard. There's a reason it's not called Exactimating. And in the software space, estimates can swing wildly. I've worked with developers on how to get better at estimating, but I haven't found the magic formula yet. It's all feel and experience and breaking things down into smaller and smaller chunks. While I happen to fancy myself pretty good at logic problems like this, I can't tell you how long it's going to take me to solve one, as I don't know the variables until I actually get started. There could be a small dragon in a tiny estimate that blows the estimate out of the water, and there's nothing like spending 40 hours on a 4-hour estimate. But it happens. And when it does, in come the impostees. So you've completed that task. Awesome. Did you do it right? Did you follow standards? Did you follow the right standards? Can it be updated without breaking? Is it in source control properly? Can it be deployed worry-free? There are multiple problems with this issue. For one, what is the bar and who is the authority? It's likely up to whoever your supervisor is, but is that it? Do your clients have code quality opinions? What about other developers on the project? As developers, we're held to incredibly high standards that are constantly changing, and obviously that can wear on somebody. Let's read this quote really quick. One of the basic rules of the universe is that nothing is perfect. Perfection simply doesn't exist. Without imperfection, neither you nor I would exist. And I think this quote is a little timely because Hawking actually redefined his theory of black holes to say that matter can escape, actually to a new dimension. But still, if Stephen Hawking can be wrong, you can be wrong too. So my first legitimate digital job was working as a production designer for a tiny agency that did a lot of color correction for a screensaver company. 95% of my job was to Photoshop these photos so that A, any color casts were removed while maintaining the feel of the photograph, B, they were sharpened in a way that you couldn't tell that they had been sharpened, and C, that they had true white and black points. So my boss was a professional photographer before he was a graphic designer, and he was notoriously picky. So we're going to do a little exercise here. This isn't the best screen, but I have color corrected one of these photos, and we're going to take a quick vote. If you think I color corrected the photo on the left, raise your hand. All right, about 5, 6 people. If you think it was the one on the right, raise your hand. Hopefully it's everybody else. All right. I actually don't know which one it is. I totally forgot. Maybe you guessed right, but the point is, it was completely subjective work that left me feeling like an imposter every single day. Unlike programming, where it works well or it doesn't, this was completely up to the whims of my boss. Sometimes I get a little overzealous and over-sharpen or whatever, but 90% of what he would correct was just completely subjective. I don't live in that world anymore, and neither do you. Your work may be subjective to a point, but in the end, if it works, has a decent design, UX, and architecture, it should be successful. So this one's near and dear to me as I've recently transitioned from development to management over the last few years. I left a position where I had amassed a great deal of knowledge and respect and traded it for a brand new career in which I had very little experience. All of a sudden, I was brand new again. I kept calling myself a junior director, hoping that people would cut me a little slack. I struggled mightily in my new role, even though I was providing the leadership and the mentorship that was required of me. It wasn't until I looked back and realized that it was me and my set of skills that had gotten me promoted, and I just needed to be me and not try to live up to whatever imaginary danlinn director of development I had in my head. So now I'm going to go over some ways in which to deal with imposter syndrome. A number of these came from a wonderful article written by Kyle Eschenroder entitled 21 Proven Ways to Overcome Imposter Syndrome. I've omitted some, expanded on others, and added my own, and I'm not exactly sure how he proved any of those things, but that's worth a read if you want to follow up on that. So the number one best way that I've found to overcome imposter syndrome is to simply say, this is imposter syndrome. Heck, if you can get yourself to say out loud, I think this is imposter syndrome, chances are you'll feel a little better. So we're going to do another group exercise. We're going to say on 3, I think this is imposter syndrome. Not 1, 2, 3, then say it, but 1, 2, say it. I also do project management. Ready? 1, 2, I think I have imposter syndrome. That was okay. You guys did pretty well for a small room there. All right, so talk to somebody you trust. Hopefully this person is someone who will not just tell you what you want to hear, but tell you the truth. And more often than not, the truth is that you're being too hard on yourself. Anybody familiar with rubber ducking in the room? All right. Very well-known technique. If no one's around and just saying I have imposter syndrome doesn't work, start talking to yourself about the problem. I know this sounds silly, but it's very well known that if you just talk about your problem, often you'll figure it out. So people will often keep a rubber ducky or some other such totem on their desk to talk to. Mine's a little clown. I used to have a client who would call me up and he was very, very long-winded. He'd go on for 5 minutes about the problem he was having without me talking, and 9 times out of 10 he'd say, oh, well, shoot, I guess all I had to do was that. And we'd be done. So after a while, I stopped answering his phone calls and sending him straight to voicemail where he would just solve all his problems, and I don't think I ever talked to him again. So we're not perfect, and despite job descriptions to the contrary, we can't and won't know everything. Maybe at one point you could, but it's no longer possible. I've accepted that my lack of a formal CS degree hinders my ability to work on low-level architecture. Although I've written a Java app before, I barely knew what I was doing and would probably be in trouble if I had to manage more than one memory thread. But that's fine. I simply look for help in those areas or plainly state that I may not be the best for the job, but I'll give it a whirl anyway if needed. And yes, I have had gray hair since my 20s. I also have a condition that my friends have coined that is very similar to bitchy resting face, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, it's resting bitch face.
Resting bitch face? Oh, okay. I have a condition called asshole listing face. When someone's describing a problem to me, I make a face similar to this gentleman. So in my head, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really hard problem. I wonder how I'm going to help this person. But apparently it comes off to people as, why are you talking to me and when are you going to stop? So now that it's been identified, I try to combat it, but it's just a known thing that I'm constantly working on. Apparently my wife knew about it the whole time. Sure, I suck at memory management, and machine code is about as foreign to me as it is to my dog, but I've also been a leader in some other areas. I was doing cool stuff with Scriptaculous way before jQuery was cool. I remember tables and layers and how to use them properly, and have even used the Zoom CSS property on purpose. I have skills in many intangible areas that make me a very valuable developer, so when I'm faced with a problem that has me temporarily stumped, I try not to hurt myself. I'm sorry to say, but sadly it's true that crashes and hackers can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch and your gang will fly on, you'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from that lurch with an unpleasant dump, and chances are then that you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun, for unslumping yourself is not easily done. So I'm a full stack developer, but I tend to lean towards the front end. A few years back, I thought it'd be a great idea to get a virtual private server and start hosting some sites. I can configure Apache. I knew how to set up virtual hosts, so how hard could it be? So fast forward through 6 months of this printing money for me, and then all of a sudden my server stopped sending email. I've been blacklisted from all the major email servers. I've been hacked. I was thrown into a panic. I went through and checked processes, killing anything I couldn't verify. I learned everything I could about IP tables and firewalls. Finally, I offered to pay a friend of mine with some experience to come over and take a look at it with me. Luckily, he only charged me a six-pack. While I was sitting there beating myself up for thinking, how could I do something like this? He was admiring the sophistication of the attack in which they hacked a mail server into the SSH claim to make all those look like successful SSH logins. So I've been sitting there thinking I had no business hosting sites, still debatable, but in reality, I had just been out-hustled by somebody who makes hacking into servers their job. I can't really beat myself up for that, and once I came to that conclusion, it was pretty easy to move on. We're all different. The same skills that make me a good developer may not be the same set of skills that make you one. If I was constantly comparing my skills to somebody with a CS degree, I'd go crazy. Not only did they sit through 4 years of in-depth computer science training that I never received, but they actually have a piece of paper that says they can do it. Which is a nice segue to the next point. This is for the self-taught people in the room. I don't mean to offend anyone with this, and obviously I'm biased not having a degree myself, but having a degree does not automatically make someone a better developer. Knowledge of CS is very important, but it's not the knowledge that we tend to leverage most often. It's our creativity and ingenuity that make us good developers. Again, this isn't cookie-cutter work. Degree or not, you chose this career because it's interesting and you likely had some innate skill in figuring stuff out. So don't think that just because you're self-taught or wherever your degree came from, that you're less better than the next developer. And your employer chose you too. Unless you lied on your resume and in your interview, they hired you for a reason, likely lots of reasons. I can tell you it's fairly frustrating as a manager when I have a lot more faith in my employee than they do themselves. So don't discount people's opinions of you. Sure, they're tinted through their own lenses, but there's truth to that and you have to see that. A friend I used to work with had no digital PM experience, but he was told to apply by another friend of ours who worked there. We saw some great things in him when we hired him, but when he got the job, he had a huge case of the imposties. He tried to focus on his experience of running a venue to try to validate himself, rather than just being open and honest about being new to it. When he realized he had the validation of his team and that he'd been hired based on potential, he was able to refocus on learning the new job and is now very successful. All right. We are superheroes. We swoop in and save the day. But we do that with creativity, not laser eye beams. If your coworkers or manager, or maybe just yourself, feel like you should be capable of more, maybe it's time to talk it out and reset expectations. If you're the one expecting too much of yourself, then maybe it's time you have a little sit down with yourself and try some of these techniques. All right, we're going to play a little video here. I'll turn my sound up for you for this very important video. It says I don't get sound. Sorry. There's situations. Be selfless. Be determined. Be courageous. Be favorite. Be the Batman. Alright, in this trailer you see everyday people faced with extraordinary circumstances where it's easy to just give up. But instead, they become Batman to overcome their obstacles. Here's why Batman resonates with people. He has no superpowers, he's just a human. Granted, he's a super rich, insanely focused martial arts expert and weapons inventor, but still, his greatest asset is his mind. We all have the capability to dig within us and find our inner Batman. Over the years, I've actually learned how to embrace stressful situations and sublimate the stress into kind of a frenetic energy that can fuel me. It took a while to do, but it was basically the realization of the old adage, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Apologies to LeBron's fans. Go Blazers. Babe Ruth struck out plenty of times. LeBron is generally regarded as one of the best basketball players ever, but he's lost a whole lot of championships. Missing shots and even losing are part of any game, and in reality, part of life. We would be nervous wrecks if we were expected to do the exact right thing at the exact right time, every time. So stop beating yourself up over every little mistake. You will come to a place where the docks are not marked. Some words are highlighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you dive in, should you turn left or right? Or right and 3/4? Or maybe not quite? Or go around the back end and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you will find, for a mind maker-upper to make up their mind. I was recently helping OMSI with a site rebuild. OMSI is the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Not having the necessary budget for the project, they asked me to architect the site and guide their developers in the development of the site. So I recently vacated a front-end architect position, so this seemed right up my alley. I led them through 14 weeks of agile development, and then 2 weeks before the expected go-live date, an issue with their calendar, the main feature of their new site, came up as a showstopper. Turns out that using Drupal views to query a date range on multi-value field collections is a little bit tricky. Who knew? So I tried a new method, then the pager stopped working. Tried something else broke. Finally, I had to hire a buddy of mine to take a look at it because it was just so weird I couldn't understand it. In the meantime, I had to go back to my client and explain that while everything had gone swimmingly up until then, we had finally hit a roadblock with major implications and that their timeline was no longer valid. Talk about imposter syndrome. I'd been hired to do something, and now I was enlisting others to do that very thing. Luckily, I've had about 15 years worth of imposter syndrome by this point, so those feelings were pretty fleeting for me. For what it's worth, the calendar was fixed and it's live, and it was one line of code I missed the group by. Don't have regrets. When you're on your deathbed, will you say to yourself, boy, I sure am glad that I gave up on X technology because I'm not sure I could have handled the success? Probably not. So dive in and take the risks and be adventurous and courageous. This is my friend Slavko, also used to work at Metal Toad. He just got certified to jump on his own out of airplanes. And as I think of it, this probably isn't the best example for me because I'm never jumping out of a plane. You can get so confused that you'll start in the race, down long rabbit holes at breaknecking pace, and grind on for miles across the weird hyperspace. Headed, I fear, towards a most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or a program to compile, or a new version to show, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the client to bite, waiting for the wind to fly a kite, waiting around to deploy at night, waiting perhaps for their rich Uncle Jake, or some angel funding, or a better break, or a string of pearl, or a pair of ampersands, or a bracket with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. So what's the best way to dive in? Just do it. Take action. I wish I could get back the time I spent standing on top of the half pipe, one foot on the board, too afraid to put my other foot on the board and just dive in. I finally did it, and you know what it took? Absolutely nothing. It took me taking action. So stop overthinking and do something. The very act of doing something is contrary to feeling like an imposter. No, that's not for you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the Git repos where Google is playing. With banner flip-flapping once more, you'll ride far, ready for anything under the stars. Ready, because that's the kind of person you are. Where's the fake it till you make it guy? Here's your slide. So I identify with this a lot. It's completely truth. I've been completely over my head thousands of times. If I go back to my dropping in analogy, if I would have simply tried it rather than just sitting there thinking about it, I likely would have succeeded on my first try. I'd never done it, but I had the basic idea of what I needed to do. I simply needed to do it, or at least try. So one of the most widely recognized way to truly overcome a bout with imposter syndrome is to write. This isn't my favorite, but it's the most widely recognized. So write what you're feeling. If you can't do that, write gibberish. You're supposed to let the negative thoughts flow out of your pen onto the paper. So this simple exercise can have a profound effect on your mental state. But even more importantly than writing when you're feeling down is recording your successes. Then, when you start to get down on yourself, you can go back to this journal of successes, and I think you'll be amazed at what you've already accomplished. So I started seeing a new doctor a few years ago. The first appointment was very revealing as she sat me down and had me tell her about every injury and sickness that I'd ever had. As I was recounting my stories, it started to become very clear to me that I've had a lot of head injuries, like double digits. Although I suffer from weird head and neck pains, it never really occurred to me that I'd done that much damage to my head. All it took for that realization to go back through my past and remember. So had I kept a journal of successful injuries, I would have already been aware. Oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be had. There are tests to be run against the newest JS fad. And the magical things you can do with that code will make you the winningest winner you know. Fame. You'll be as famous as a coder can be. With the whole wide world watching you win on TV. Live coding as a sport maybe someday? No takers? Okay. Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too. Games you can't win because you'll play against you. All alone. Whether you like it or not, alone will be something you'll be quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that'll scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. So now I'd like to introduce something that may resonate with this crowd more than talking to a rubber duck or writing in a journal. This is the concept of test-driven personal development. A lot of us developers are great at logic, but maybe not so much with feelings and emotions. So in an effort to break down the problem into something we can understand a little better, I came up with the idea of test-driven personal development. As we go through this, you may notice that it's pretty much a gimmick. But our mind is playing tricks on us, so there's no reason we can't play tricks on it. So the basic steps are just what you'd expect. Identify the problem, run a test if you already have it, otherwise write it and run it. So we'll take a look at this flowchart. It starts with a problem that I've written a test for. The test reads, as a developer tasked with updating a color, I want to clear the caches so that I can review my changes. What that really means through the imposter lens is, oh my god, all I had to do was update a color, now the site is broken, white screen of death, what the hell's a segmentation fault, I'm going to be fired. So we run the test and of course it fails, but maybe we get an error message. So we Google using the test words and any error message text. If you don't get any results, use your Google foo and try searching again. Keep doing this until you've gotten no results for at least 3 times. This will be very, very rare. So let's say that you just don't find anything in those searches, that it's time to look for new ideas. Again, it's going to be very, very rare. Some things to try if you find yourself in this spot. Maybe you're barking up the wrong tree. Maybe you reevaluate what has been done or what needs to be done. Maybe your test just needs a rewrite. Maybe it's time to go to Stack Overflow. Or maybe it's time to go to a meetup or find a mentor or hire a friend to help out. For what it's worth, I've listed both times in my 20-year career that I had to pay somebody else to help me. So it should be pretty rare. The much more likely scenario is that you get results. Maybe you don't find a silver bullet like, yes, exclamation point. Maybe it's more like, yes, question mark? Either way, rejoice, for you're not alone. So you got results. Does that mean that you can actually fix it? No? Then can it even be fixed? If not, then you'll likely need to find a new solution. Or maybe it's just out of your wheelhouse and it's time to go back to your other resources. But maybe, just maybe, you're able to fix it. So you fix it and you make sure to keep your test and your notes for your journal of successes. This process takes the emotions out of it while allowing us to simply take action one step to the next, keeping moving. After a few iterations of this, you should start to internalize it and have an internal framework for dealing with difficult imposter syndrome situations. At the end of the day, there's nothing novel about this flowchart. It's just a way to force you to take action and record your successes. You could put, as a homeowner, I need to mow my lawn so that my neighbor stops complaining. And this process would help you get that done, and eventually you wouldn't even need the flowchart anymore to mow your lawn with confidence. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. On you will go, though the enemies prowl. On you will go, though the hack and cracks howl. Onward up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and you still support IE. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far, and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange libraries as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right floats with your lefts. So just a few recap points I'd like to make. You don't suck. This is just part of your profession, and we all get this. Identify when it happens to you and how to see it coming, and keep a journal of successes to remind yourself of your accomplishments. And finally, the show must go on. Keep moving. Keep on trucking. And you will succeed. Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Ali Van Allen O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. That's it. Thanks for coming to my presentation. So now I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions, but because this is on imposter syndrome, none of you are going to raise your hands. Then we're going to say the presentation's done, and you're all going to line up and ask me questions. So, how about we ask those questions right now? No need to be scared.
Actually, I have a question. So what happens if you actually, let it overtake you and sort of give up for a while? Is it impossible to get back in it?
Oh, absolutely not. I think you identified why you gave up, right?
Right, yeah.
I don't think it's impossible to get back into it at all. But I'll give you a personal experience. When I thought robots were taking over and I got into project management, I was able to go back to programming no problem after about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions I can answer? Yeah.
What happens if your technology that you know is so outdated, it's just, you can't get into what they're doing now?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I do have some advice for that. One, obviously, you need to kind of pick up some of the newer stuff and get some of that under your belt. But one thing I see a lot with people who are either switching areas in IT, like they're moving from networking to programming or something like that, is there's a big tendency to discount all of your prior experience. So I always encourage people to really utilize as much of that experience in your new profession as possible. And if you're in the right place, that will be valuable. It won't be a detriment. Cool. Any other questions? Well, I suppose I'll give you a big long break then. Thanks, everybody.